What does a free people do when moving forward? Do they sit on the merry-go-round of current circumstance and follow the same centrifugal forces, forcing them against the wall that they feel that they have no control or investment in the process? Of course not. We look forward, and in order to look forward, and what I believe that they have removed from the American society at the best is they have removed our capacity for imagination. They have removed our desire to dream, our desire to look forward and do that wonderful thing that we do so well in America, and that is be ingenious. And to that end, I think that I want to discuss some of my ideas of what it looks like in this future America. And I want to invite you, I want to plead with you to begin to imagine and hope and dream an America that we can bring about in the future. Instead of sitting here and concerning ourselves and worrying about the tragedies of the past, yes, they must be fixed. Yes, they must be manipulated. Yes, they must be eradicated. But it is the true and obvious vision of the future that will drive that eradication and will bring us to that glorious position that we have yet to see brought about in America, and that is, what do we want America to be? Not what it has been, but what it can be. And so, if you would indulge me a bit, I'm going to investigate something that I've just written. It's called Right Here. What is buried within your imagination that has been hidden for fear that you might let it out and perhaps be disappointed at the failure of its depth and presentation? The future of America only exists in imagination. We must therefore determine to open up that place, that frightening store of our dreams and expectations, if we were ever to transform the present structure that is failing us into the America we only dream that it could be. Do you have hope? Do you have an idea, a vision, perhaps even a bullet list of things you would change to prepare for a future that would be more easily defensed? Perhaps more prosperous, assured, maybe with an expectation of leaving legacy for our children's children, and so on. For the longest time, it appears that the driving influences in this great big country of ours have been trying to stuff us into a box with the same old ideas, the same chronic narcisses, and the same prognosis of a future wrought with depression and ambition that would eventually die a horrible death in the reality of stagnation. When did imagination leave our homes, our offices, our churches, and our hearts? We've forgotten one of the principal joys of a free nation, and that is dreaming big. We shan't leave it to Hollywood and a manner of professional narrative designers determining the direction and desires of an America for us, but the designs that we see as proper for our own lives, what we wish to see in an America that has not yet arrived, what we would change about the current structure and the ideas upon which we may collectively design a future twice as good as the past, one in which we may carry us forward, but with a hope, and we may lose a focus upon the current America that has perhaps failed us a bit. How would you change the schools for our children and young adults? What would you teach that is presently being forgotten or paid little to no attention? What programs in the government would you shut down in order to transform the education system? How would America put parents back in charge of what their children learn and don't learn? Who would have the responsibility of oversight? How would we assure that the schools are doing well and can share in their advances and successes with other schools who may need a boost? How will we determine the curriculum offered students based upon their likely positions in society we envision? How will we offer all the options to the kids that they might reach whatever potential is available, but also have the practical selection of crafts, technical and administrative functions available for them to choose public service as their first venture into the adult world? What are the best ideas out there? Can we copy them or improve upon them to get something uniquely American that offers the benefits of structures to save cost as they are already developed? How do we see our children growing old in 50 years or so? And what will they need to know then in order to not only to survive, but to thrive in a new, robust America? What powers should be given directly back to the states? How do we encourage the states to learn from one another, sharing contact and ideas to further those programs that are effective and quickly abandon those that are not? How do we commit to venture the same road without possibility of departure from the group by those rebels determining that they wish to go their own road, yet give them the freedom to demonstrate their new ideas if they are beneficial for all? How do we begin to chip away at the federal government in order to redistribute those powers that were never meant for the federal government, but were meant for the people to be utilized in their local communities and states? How do we make the playing field fair for the states when so many have a much greater impact with regard to election authority or financial dominion? How do the states recover those lands that were taken by the federal government through less than legal intention? Do we hand over maintenance of the federal parks to states and provide them additional funding to protect and sustain those monuments? What then of the military? Is it too large? Is it appropriate to have a budget that is sometimes exponentially larger than many countries combined? How much money is funding the military over which we, the people, have no accountability or control? How do we rectify the lack of transparency in secret programs with secret budgets that claim they need secrecy from the very people who they're trying to protect with that secrecy? How do we reconstruct, if at all, the relationship between Congress and military, that they might function collectively even when politics are evenly balanced or walking in a paralytic manner? How long is long enough for military personnel to serve? Is 20 years the maximum, or do we allow for greater length of public service based on job specificity or rank? Do we allow military personnel to go to work for defense contractors to maintain the votes in Congress? How are the defense contractors to be inhibited from leveraging the Congress to act in its best interest against perhaps the will of the people by job offering, name dropping, or offers of bribes and kickbacks from large federal contracts? Do we do away with the federal contracting system and reduce it to a state level? How do we budgetarily determine the correct size for the federal government that it might be reduced and functionally controlled in its growth, that it may never become this large mammoth beast again? What determines what departments must be closed, reallocated, or combined to produce a functional government? What groups may be transferred to state control or multi-state control? How do we establish term limits that are carved in granite for all public servants, that no deep state may ever be contemplated, never mind actually recruited and established once again? What do we do about taxes? How are they going to be reallocated to the states, and how is the federal government to be funded as it was constitutionally intended? How do we establish firewalls against foreign or domestic wealthy families' ownership to public resources, infrastructures, and land assets? How do we firewall the ownership of public assets by corporations? How do we strip the corporations of human rights that they may never be looked at as an immortal collective arm of the living membership of a number of fictitious humans? How do we determine who has the right to own American lands within each state, that they may not be leveraged by foreign entities, secret societies, or religious groups to transform American politics and manipulate voting rolls and turnout? What does our immigration policy look like going forward? Do we allow X amount of people from certain countries based on their trade relationship with America, or should exchange of assets be even a determining factor? What are the unintended consequences of each decision that we make, that we might not create a larger calamity while solving a smaller problem? How do we undermine the allotment of foreign students in our universities? How might our universities be collectively policed for programs that intend sponsor for insurrection, idealist, political, or terrorist intentions? And how might they rapidly be stopped by the members who send their students to those schools? How can Americans possess a transparent view in the universities in their state that they might quickly support or withdraw support based upon the curriculum and intentions of leadership? How do we provide firewalls for members, donations, grants, or board members from foreign agencies seeking to socially engineer or create activist movements within our universities? How do the American people know that there is enough energy, food, water, and essential goods stored in safe measures to support the people even in times of difficulty or war throughout the foreseeable future? How do Americans begin to play a role in the active collection, preservation, storage, logistics, maintenance of those assets determined for emergency circumstance? What are the basic preparatory and emergency steps necessary for each family member to know in the event of an emergency or wartime dilemma in their neighborhood? What are the roles to which each may be held for volunteerism or service in the event of natural disasters and public dilemma? Is public service any kind, whether local or federal, an act of patriotism? Should students leave high school be expected to serve at least 2 years in some form of national service, whether public works, emergency services, or military? Would this service be applicable to receiving college credit for sacrifice made in the education developed? What are the long-term projects for which we must invest as a nation in order to maintain America in the 22nd century? Shall we look into projects as NWAPA, space exploration, and seed development in order to guarantee a prosperous future? Do we control population growth? How is abortion to be made illegal yet still remain within the prudent expectations of a population sustainable for this nation to survive and prosper? Do we replace those numbers that are found insufficient in population growth with people from other nations, or simply refine our goals? Do we even have metrics or agreed upon standards for growth and control, or simply allow each person to live free, serving their own needs and desires? What constitutes an egregious circumstance beyond the pale, for we know that every boundary and rule will always be tested? How do we assure that states shall never infringe upon the rights over which they have no authority, especially that authority which belongs solely to the people? What do we do about artificial intelligence? Should we continue to investigate its practical application? Should we abandon the research, leaving those advances to other nations? Should we go full speed ahead with reckless abandon and see how fast and far the technologies may take us as a nation? What about cloning? What about gene manipulation, biometric enhancements, implants, and drug regimens? How do we deal with the dissemination of communication devices that have the capacity to invade every inch of our personal privacy, essentially transforming us into slaves? Do we govern the government and corporations in a strict manner, dictating to them how they may and what they may utilize, store, trade, transfer, and collect? Who has the authority over the internet, and how much of our considered private movements on the web are actually completely under our own control versus those that are owned, collected, sifted, stored, and sold by government, corporate, or military enterprises? How do the people rapidly take an effective action to stop violations of this strict privacy consideration? If no one is going to follow the UN mandates except the Americans that are forced to comply with international documents and campaigns over which we have no authority or control, then why does the UN mandate override American nationalism? What control do we personally have over the UN as Americans, or has that control been transferred to representatives who appear intent upon globalism, converse to the American people's determination? What shall be done with international agencies as the UN, Fed, BIS, CFR, TLC, Bilderberg, etc.? May Americans determine that they do not wish to participate in these agencies or ventures and simply vote in to mandate those agencies to which our representatives may venture? This is a synopsis, perhaps maybe even a literary catalyst, intended to present a primary list example of those questions, or those types of questions, which should be asked by an American population with imagination at their fingertips. We can make America what we wish it to be, but cannot be completed without the injection of our American ingenuity and imagination. Certainly, once the questions have been asked, answered, revisited, revised, changed, and submitted for general agreement, then a plan forward and the elbow grease sweat necessary to bringing these ideas into reality would be in order. However, the process must begin with vision. Collective vision, constructed from the greatest compilation of hopes, dreams, and wants that we may collect from those who would transform this nation. Let's face it, There are going to be some ideas upon which we immediately agree, and some upon which we will immediately determine as no go. But in the process, that is the most important function to bring about. Without it, we will go nowhere or remain on the current structure of being handed the ideas by those who have an agenda attached to the ideas that they are offering. The only way for government of, by, and for the people to function to optimal standards is for the people themselves to be involved. Be advised, the first thing they will tell us is that what we are undertaking is frankly impossible. At which point, my advice would be to respond, of course it is, but we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. But your response, although it may not mirror my Christian faith, I hope that it is equally positive in nature and delivery. The future stands before us, awaiting our input, our sweat, investment, and heart. Where does it begin? Right here. Thank you, folks. As always, I do take extreme pleasure and I do respect the time that you've given me to present my ideas. And I do appreciate the opportunity to motivate and to act as a catalyst for perhaps sponsoring change in America, because that's what we're all hoping for. And if I may play that role, then I will be blessed to have played that role. I thank you for your time. I love you, and I appreciate, as always, your comments, your investment, and frankly, in this episode, we're all going to have to be involved and test the limits of that wonderful imagination that was given you by God. He imagined the world, and look at it, and we frankly resemble Him. What kind of imagination does that mean that we have? In Jesus' name, I pray over this America, and I pray that the Lord shine His face upon us, and that He bless these plans to move forward with imagination and hope in our hearts. Have a wonderful evening.